Hello recipe decoders, today I'm going to show you how to make some big, thick, and chewy chocolate chip cookies. For this recipe, you're going to need 2 cups or 280 grams of all-purpose flour, 1/2 teaspoon or 3 grams of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon or 3 grams of salt, 3/4 cups or 165 grams of unsalted butter, 1 cup or 220 grams of brown sugar, 1/2 cup or 110 grams of white sugar, 1 tablespoon or 10 milliliters of vanilla extract, 1 medium or large egg, 1 medium or large egg yolk, 2 cups or 340 grams of semi-sweet chocolate chips. First, we'll grab a large bowl with a rubber spatula. Then add in the flour, baking soda, salt. Then mix everything together thoroughly. And then set everything aside. Now we can assemble our stand mixer, and I'm going to be using the flat beater attachment. Firstly, I'll add in the butter, which has already been melted in a microwave. Then the brown sugar, and last, the white sugar. Mix everything on a low speed setting. Afterwards, add in the egg, and then add in the egg yolk. Next, you can add in the vanilla essence. And now we can start adding in the dry ingredients, but do it in parts. If anything gets stuck to the mixing blade, just push it back down into the bowl. And now we can add in the chocolate chips, but only about half of it. And then mix it on a low speed setting. Afterwards, go ahead and add in the rest. By this point, everything should be incorporated and the bowl can be removed from the stand mixer. For the next part of this recipe guide, I'm going to be using a round and rectangular baking sheet. And I'm going to lay out some parchment paper for both baking sheets. For the round baking sheet, you're going to cut out a square roughly the same size, and then fold it in half. Fold it in half one more time. Then fold it in half diagonally to make a triangle. And then fold it once more to make a cone. Find the center of your round baking sheet and then place the cone upon it. Make sure the tip of the cone is at the center and the wide part is at the edge. And then grab a scissor and cut off the excess. If you've done it right, you should now have a round sheet of parchment paper, which should fit nicely into your round baking sheet. Now normally I would use a 7/8 ounce scoop for my cookie dough, but this recipe in particular is supposed to produce bigger cookies, so instead I'll be using a 1/4 portion size measuring cup. And what you want to do is just scoop out enough to fill to the lip of the measuring cup and then tap it out onto the baking sheet. Now this isn't a very difficult process, but it sure is a bit tedious, which is why I prefer to use an ice cream scoop instead. And because these cookies are bigger, just make sure you give them enough space. Around 3 inches apart should be fine. And don't worry about separating the cookie dough by hand. Just make sure your hands were already cleaned prior to doing so. For my rectangular baking sheet, I was only able to fit up to 6 pieces of cookie dough. And now I'll do the same thing for the round baking sheet. Once more, just make sure each cookie dough is about 3 inches apart. And now both baking trays can go in the oven for about 15 to 17 minutes at 325 degrees Fahrenheit or 165 degrees Celsius. And here's the final results of the cookies after removing them from the oven. And I wasn't kidding, these are some big cookies. I think you could fit 3 ordinary cookies into just one of these. So after the cookies have cooled for about 5 minutes, you can go ahead and transfer them to a bowl or container. And then you can just set them aside or place them in the refrigerator to cool even faster. So normally I will reuse parchment paper for multiple batches, but I accidentally tore this one up while removing the first batch. If this happens, throw it out, then grab another piece of parchment paper and lay it out onto the baking sheet. Then go ahead and add in the next batch. Fortunately, this was the last batch as the dough had completely run out. But this is expected because we're making really big cookies after all. And here's the final batch, fresh out of the oven. I keep trying to remove them carefully, but the parchment paper keeps tearing with little effort. I guess this is because the cookies are so thick, they weaken the parchment paper as they sweat in the oven. However, it's not a big deal, the cookies still came out fine, and I'm satisfied with the end results. So now I've transferred all the cookies into a bigger bowl, and now it's time to do the taste test. But obviously, I'm not going to eat all of these cookies, just a couple of them. On the outside, they take up more space in your hands, and there's an obvious heavier and girthy feel to them than a regular cookie. But here's what they look like on the inside. Yup, I bet your blood sugar levels start spiking just by looking at this. So if you've made this recipe, please just eat them in moderation. And frankly, I couldn't even eat both of these. They're just so very fulfilling, so one was more than enough for me. But anyway, that's it for this video. If you've made this recipe, I hope yours came out great too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.